Welcome to this week's episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm the host, Eric Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to share their stories. I hope you'll support tonight's guest. As for myself, I'm a father, author, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to see some of my creative works, my novels, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks for joining us tonight, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to the latest episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, if I can get that right. Tonight we have Jack MacTavish with us. Hey, Jack.
Hey guy, how's it going? Good to see you.
Going well. So you asked me a question right before I hit record. So now
Yeah.
ask your question.
All right. Yeah. So, absolutely. I'm Jack MacTavish. I'm starting to write. I'm not published yet. Why the hell do you want to talk to me?
Well, I think I took it out a couple months back, so I'm putting a new one in soon where basically my intro to every podcast starts where interesting people come to basically tell their stories. Um, I saw your profile. I guess it was on Instagram. I'm assuming it was Instagram. It could have been
Yeah.
X and that pushed me to Instagram, but saw your profile. I know we follow each other. You follow obviously a lot of the writers I know, and I
Yeah.
just started
Absolutely.
kind of looking at your posts and looking at your stories. And to me, I don't care if you sell 5 books or 5 million books. I want to talk to an interesting person. And there's a high probability the person that sells 5 books might be more interesting than one that sells 5 million.
That's
So
also a possibility. Yeah.
it's a strong possibility. So yeah, so when I saw your thing and I read your bio when I first had connected with you, and I'm like, now Jack's got some stories. That would be an interesting podcast.
Okay. Cool. I'll take it. I'll
Yeah,
take.
no.
I was like, well, Eric wants me on his podcast. Hang on, let me take a look at Eric for a second. It's like, dude, he interviewed Kyle Mills and Jack Carr. I mean, two guys that I think a lot of. I mean,
Right.
I actually met Jack in Afghanistan years ago before he was doing what he's doing now.
Okay.
Uh, I was like, that's pretty cool. I would love the opportunity. And just getting a chance to get out there a little bit more and kind of
Yeah.
get to work on the name and all that. So good.
Well, that's a big deal, and so many, man. It's a loaded question, Arias. There's a loaded story, but behind that is it's so hard, especially when you're getting going, to get exposure, and
Yeah.
especially now. I wrote my first novel in 2014. I didn't create a website or get on Twitter, or at the time it was Twitter and Face. I had a Facebook account years before that. I got rid of it because it was the stupidest thing. But it was the first one of the agents that rejected me that was like, well, this book sounds good. We like the introduction, the first whatever 20 pages. What's your social media presence? And I didn't reply back this, but my thought to this was social media is for suckers. Why would I be on social media?
Yeah.
And their response to however I worded it nicely was, when you got 10,000 Twitter followers, contact us back. And I was like, what? How do you do that? So that started a journey for me of figuring out like, how do you break into social media? And
Yeah.
getting and it was easier, I think, back then, and especially I think the exposure you got from social media back then would help drive book sales more. I think it's turned into a law of diminishing returns as time's gone on. I think the power of it is much less, probably because like 70% of Twitter is bots, supposedly, or
Yes.
whatever the number is. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's social media for me is very, very interesting. Until I started writing, I was never on social media.
yeah.
I mean, the entire time that I was in the Army Reserve, and then another job that I did for a little while, and I was very anti-social media. I didn't want any presence on there.
Hmm.
And but then once I made the decision to start writing, I very, very slowly got onto social media, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's a lot of fun, and I love my followers. And it's
Hmm.
crazy because like yeah, I say I love you a lot because it's just a good way to it's just kind and generous. And
Hmm.
so it's funny. I catch myself saying sometimes, like, as I end up post, "Thanks, guys, love y'all." And but I do. I mean, I love my
Yeah.
followers. I've got some very loyal ones, and people that I interact with. And that guy was messaging me earlier this evening saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing. How
Hmm.
do I get started?"
Hmm.
I'm like, not even published yet. I've written about 5 books,
Right.
but it's getting there. But like Jack Stewart, I mean, I don't. I'm sure you've met him or you've probably interviewed him, and
Mhm.
he's doing great. He's got the great Webb Griffin book that's coming out soon, and I cannot wait because Webb Griffin is part of the reason why I started writing.
He was one
Um,
of my big ones as well when I
I
was
got
younger.
I
Yeah.
love Griffin. I've read each of his series except for the police one. I've read each of his series
Okay.
probably no less than 5 to 10 times. The
Wow.
complete series. I mean, I
Yeah.
just devour those. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, Jack told me a while back, and he's just been incredibly kind to me. He's
Mhm.
like, writer's right, keep grinding, and oh, by the way, you'll probably be on your fifth, sixth, seventh book by the time you get picked up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, sound advice. Let me keep writing.
Yeah, I forget. I'll get the details wrong, and Jack would probably yell at me for it. I can't remember if it was his fourth or fifth that actually, or third, fourth, or fifth. I think it was fourth or fifth that got the publishing contract. Because a couple of his,
Yeah,
I've read some of his unpublished books because I've known Jack for a while.
yeah,
Talked to him a lot more back then than now. I don't speak to him as often, but they were really good books. And it's like, how is this
I'm
book not
sure.
getting picked up?
Yeah, I'm
Um,
sure.
it's kind of crazy. And yes, he actually met me down in New Orleans in 2021, I think it was. It was the year Boucher Con was in it's going there this year too, but it was the last time it was supposed to be there and they canceled it.
Yeah,
I had already paid. I had already planned out a scene for what was going to be my second book, Breach of Trust, and I needed to write it in New Orleans. And I said, "Screw that, I'm going." So I
yeah,
went anyways, even though
nice.
I canceled. And he met me down there. He actually picked me up at the airport, brought me over to Joint Base New Orleans,
Mhm.
and he got me in the simulator for the Hornet,
Oh, nice.
which was just like I kept begging him, like, I really just want to get in a plane. I'll take the simulator, but I want a plane. And he's just like,
Yeah,
dude. It, soon thereafter, Mark Graney got in, and I'm just like, I reached out at that point. I'm like, dude, Mark gets the back seat and I don't.
yeah,
He's like, are you a New York Times bestseller? I was
yeah,
like,
exactly.
no, and I don't know if I ever will be. So he said, maybe in a few years when some of my friends become admirals, we'll see what we can do. So I might ask again in 10 years. We'll see.
Yeah, there you go. Sounds good.
But it was a cool experience. It was yeah, and Jack's one of those guys that's super supportive of other authors.
Yeah.
And that's the standard though. That's one thing that I try to tell
Hmm.
people as part of my journey is because when I got into this, I figured I came out, I'm still in the business world. I still have a 9 to 5 job, but I thought, it's pretty competitive at times, especially
Hmm.
when you're looking at promotions and other stuff. And I
Yeah,
figured, okay, writing's going to be the same way where, you're going to probably have to make sure you got a plate back there to keep the knives from sticking.
yeah,
Um,
no, not at all.
no,
Not at
100%
all.
not that.
Yeah, and I won't be that way ever.
Yeah, I
I
I
just
could tell.
just I won't be. There's no excuse for it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have been since I started doing this, and you talk to a couple of people, and imposter syndrome is something that I think a lot of unpublished
Mhm.
writers deal with. And it's funny, at Thriller Fest a month or two ago, we were up there. It was the third time I'd been, and each
Okay.
time I meet more and more people and love it. And we go to a couple of shows while we're up there and just have a great little vacation.
Yeah.
This year we met Lois and Linda, who told us that we had accents, which was really entertaining being from North Carolina. But yeah, like I remember I was standing around the bar with Jack Stewart, Ward Larson, and Ryan Pote,
Hmm.
and I'm just thinking to myself, man, the hell am I even doing here?
Yeah.
And then it's funny. I actually talked to Ryan about that later on. He's like, "Don't worry about it, buddy. We all start there,
Yeah.
and so you just keep writing, you just
Yeah.
keep going."
Well, I interviewed Ryan recently, and Ryan, I didn't know really much about him until I started reading about him, and we started following each other probably a couple months ago. And same story where I think
He
his
was
book
probably on book
might
five
be
or
his
six
fifth
or something
one.
like that. Crazy, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the common. I was number four. Before I got a publishing contract, I had wrote 3 other books, so I was four. I think Don Bentley was four. Four is
Mhm.
a common one. I've heard a lot of people say they wrote 3 full books. It was the fourth one, and I think what ends up happening is your first 2 or 3 books or whatever are almost like being an apprentice.
Yeah.
You believe the first one normally is like this is gonna. I mean, I thought when I wrote my first book, I was like that dump truck's gonna pull in the driveway and
Mhm.
I'm not going to be Scrooge McDuck. I'm not going to be able, I'm going to swim in that money.
Yeah.
Complete
No,
opposite. They ignored me and I'd get, hey, good job, not interested. I'm like, well, why aren't you interested? And then you don't get a response. So it was years of just, and I was just of the mindset back then, especially of if they don't like this one, just go write the next one. I'm not going to sit here and query a book for 10 years. And um, I know people, and still personally know people that have had agents for 4 or 5 years and not gotten that next step. The publishers haven't, haven't
yeah,
signed them.
yeah, I've heard that too, and I've talked to people that have had this been in the same boat.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I wrote the first book that I wrote. I was a romance novel, believe it or not.
There you go.
It started during a pretty difficult time in life, and it wrote a romance novel, and it will forever sit on the shelf somewhere, not even the shelf behind me. It will just it's probably just horrible. Um, but then I was like, well, I wrote this. Why don't I try my hand at writing something more of a thriller, more of a
Hmm.
military espionage um, sort of book? And I've worked around that community. Not an operator, never have been an operator. I practice emergency medicine for a living,
Yeah.
um, and I was like, I can do this. And from the start, it was because I'm just probably so heavily influenced by Webb Griffin.
Hmm.
Uh, it was a very Griffinish kind of book, and so I wrote the first book, and it was called Letter of Mark,
Hmm.
and was working with an editor, and he's a great editor, and he does a really good job. And he's like, okay, he's like, you've got this one, but what'll really get you to stand out to an agent is to have a second one. So I started grinding on a second one. So I wrote a second one, Sons of Liberty,
Right.
and kept grinding on that one. And like, oh man, so that's actually the first, actually, when I started submitting letter of mark to agents, and it's just getting crickets. Um,
Hmm.
so um, I started working on a third book in that series, and it's called Spearhead. And I'm about 50,000 words into it, and I'm working with the editor, and he's like, man, he goes, I don't know. He goes, your vibe is more like action adventure. Um,
Mm.
can you pivot? Show me how
Hmm.
good of a writer you are. Can you pivot and write me an
Can you
action
pivot? Yeah.
adventure novel? So I did. And that book is called Royal Diamonds. And it's actually out now, kind of making the rounds. I've got a couple of uh, uh, fantastic agents. One agent that I've been chasing for years, really wanting to
Hmm.
get, just like, yeah, I don't think this one's right for the market right now. But kind
Yeah.
of wagon. But that's okay. Fine. I've got a few others that I'm kind of waiting to hear back from. I think I've probably queried 45 or 50 different agents, but there's a couple that I'm kind of, holding out hope for.
Yeah. And then there's nothing
So,
wrong with that.
so
I
yeah.
normally, with the 4 books I had queried, it wasn't uncommon to hit 100
Yeah.
was my experience. And I just thought that was ridiculous. I even had, I know in your bio you had mentioned Brad Taylor being an influence. So I've known Brad from a writing perspective as a writing friend for many years now. And I was at one of his book signings. Oh,
Mhm.
man, this was probably 2018 or 19, probably 19. Um, at one of his book signings, and there was his agent, John Talbot, who I had queried a couple of years before, and he had been interested, but found issues, passed on it. So I see him, introduce myself, and he remembered me, which was interesting. Remembered the book I had written or something about it, I was like, wow, I did make some impression. So he's like, well, what are you working on now? I said, well, I've got something, and this is going to be a big deal. And I think I sat there with him while the event was going on, and Brad was signing and doing that, and everyone was just having drinks. I think I talked to them for at least 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And
Oh well.
I get like pretty deep into my pitch for the body man, and he stops me and he goes, I got a question for you. I was like, yeah, well, anything you want. He goes, what kind of sources do you have, or how did you figure this out? How did you realize this role existed and all the details? And I just looked at him and I said, John, I made this whole thing up. This is
Mm.
complete. And he goes, Dad, this is really good then. If this is all a figment of imagination, you're onto something. So I thought, man, I've hooked him in. I actually drove him. Instead of getting a cab, I was leaving to go back home. I had like a 3 hour drive after the signing. So I said, man, if you want me to drop you off at the hotel, it was literally on the way to Interstate 26 in Charleston. So I
Mhm.
dropped him off at the hotel, and I thought when he got out of the car, I was like, I'm gonna get me an agent. So he was like, yeah, send me the document tomorrow. I will dig in. I was so crushed when a week later he was like, it's really good, but I believe if I recall now, it's been 6 years or whatever, however many years it's been. He had issues with my dialogue.
Mm.
which was then really interesting because the next big agent I met and was interested in the book praised the dialogue and had issues with another part of the book. And that's where the light bulb went out for me. And I just said, this is so subjective. And some of the,
Yeah.
if you get similar results, if everyone says your dialogue sucks, dialogue probably sucks. But if
Yeah.
one person says it and the other person likes it, you have to then realize, okay, it's not the right person. It's not the right
Yeah.
agent. It's not, maybe it's not the right book even. But but you better have thick skin because you get so excited, especially when you have an agent like Talbot of his caliber who, he's got a bunch of big name authors under him now at this point. He had less, I think, back in 19, but he's really grown his pedigree of authors. And I was just kind of Jack Stewart's under him,
Yeah.
or at least last
Yeah.
I knew Jack was under him. But it was just one of those like crazy moments, and then I was just so let down, and I was like, man. But I quickly just bounced back and said, okay, it's not the right one.
Yeah.
Just move on.
Yeah. You just got to keep grinding. It's okay.
Yeah.
You just keep on going. And it's funny. I've heard Jack Carr say before on some of the different interviews that he's done, and he just says writers write.
Yeah.
So yeah, just keep writing. So and it's interesting now because the project I'm working on now is it's more satire and comedy. There's still sort of an espionage
Hmm.
kind of slant to it. There's kind of an action adventure slant to it as well. But it's funny. I literally just started sketching it out in a notebook about a year and a half ago, and I was like, "What happens if you retire from the CIA and you come home and you know your wife slings a Zulu spear at you from your last deployment to Africa, and she's like, here's your walking papers, and here's my attorneys from Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, and what do we do with that? And what kind of rollicking adventure can you have, kind of making your way south? Um, so. So we'll see how that one shakes out. And
I
if
hope
not,
this was mainly fiction. I hope this didn't occur in real life.
yeah. I mean, I haven't had a Zulu spear thrown at me.
So it's funny though. And I've mentioned on the podcast before. So I went through. I don't know if anyone goes through a fun divorce. Some people say they might, but I think they're liars. I went through one, and the book that literally just came out back in July was the first thing I wrote after everything kind of settled down. I hadn't
Mm.
written for over a year.
Yeah.
And literally, I've mentioned on a couple of the recent podcasts when I was a guest promoting the book, literally after I walked out of the lawyer's office, knowing kind of what my future was going to be, I sat down that night and started writing the first chapters of what became Supreme Justice. It was a different title
Mm.
at the time, but it was a female-centric assassin's tale, and then I eventually flipped it into the body man world because I said, "Man, I can't start a third series." And she was part of she started from the body man world, and I'm like, how
Mm.
do I integrate her? And I figured it out. I figured a way of, okay, this is the way I can give a path for her for future books and for all that. Um, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, but it was born out of this horrible event, basically.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's where the good things in life happen is out of pain and out of, learning lessons a lot of times the hard way. And that's when
Yeah.
good things happen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You take that pain, you kind of analyze and you think through it, and there's good things that happen from it. It's I very much write from a perspective of sometimes, especially like in real kind of emotional scenes or tense scenes,
Hmm.
things that I've experienced personally. And, there's an opening chapter in Royal Diamonds where a guy is sitting there holding the hand of his mother as she's dying.
Hmm.
And, I've done that. It was horrible. And, after when I was 20 years old, it marked me. And, but I get a chance to honor that memory
Hmm.
in writing a damn good scene
Yeah.
of the start of an action adventure novel that I know my mother would have loved. So,
Right.
uh, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, good stuff.
The last chapter of Supreme, talking about moms, the last chapter of Supreme Justice, I knew where I was going in the story, and we talked offline about Scotland. So I took
Mhm.
my mom. I don't every other Thanksgiving I don't have my kids for a week.
Mm.
And when all that transpired years ago, I just made a deal with myself and said, okay, I don't want to spend Thanksgiving 30 minutes for my kids. And my ex would let me see them. I could go see them
Mm.
for an
Yeah.
hour or whatever. We could exchange time. But it kind of changes the dynamic when you're going to probably be spending Thanksgiving dinner up the road at friend's house or whatever. So I just made a deal and said, okay, two rules. Thanksgiving week or around Thanksgiving, leave the country and go to a country you've never been to for Thanksgiving Day. So 3 years back now, I was in Wales for a concert. I'd never been to Wales before. Flew to UK by myself, met
Mhm.
up with some friends in Wales, then went back to England or London, for a few days by myself. Had a wonderful time. So fast forward to last year, I'd reached out to my mom and I said, she got excited thinking I was going to come home
Mhm.
for Thanksgiving. And because I was like, hey, Thanksgiving this year. And she was like, oh, you're going to come home. I was like, no, no, no. We're going to go to Ireland. And she was like, really? It's like,
Oh
yes, we're
wow,
going to
that's
Ireland.
awesome.
So I was able to take her to Ireland. I based part of the book there, a very small portion, but a crucial scene was based in Ireland, and I wrote it partially on the ride back to Dublin on the paddy wagon bus, and then I finished it on the flight. And so once I got it done, that last chapter, I just handed it. My mom was in the middle seat, I was in the aisle. I handed it over to my mom, and I said, "What do you think?" And she read it, and she was like, "I love it. That's great." So I was
Oh,
like,
that's
"Okay,
awesome.
mom's approval, we're good."
Yeah,
So
at least your mom likes it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
and
great.
she has
Yeah,
to.
that's awesome.
She'd be a horrible mother if she was like, "Well, this is shit."
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back. I mean, when you're talking about like writing your first couple of books, it's just like being in graduate school again,
Mhm.
and I don't have an MFA. I am. I mean, none of my education kind of points me towards writing at
Towards
all,
writing, yeah.
really. I remember, when I was in ROTC in undergrad, having one of my ROTC professors be like, you're the worst army writing style writer ever. You're horrible. And I'm like, you're a jackass. But yeah, so
You might
I
have
mean,
met a
nothing.
few of those over the course of your career.
Yeah, yeah, but you go through, and I really think that I used to have a saying when I was an Army officer and when I was in command. Everything is training for the next event.
Hmm.
So every time I write, I mean, literally, this podcast is training for the next podcast that I do. I mean, I
Hmm.
watched a bunch of videos today and look at lighting and sound and stuff like that just to make sure that it sounded okay and looked okay,
Hmm.
uh, but you just kind of every time I write a book, a finished chapter, it's kind of like, okay, well, I can do this next time a little bit better, and I
Hmm.
like that. So.
Yeah. Well, it's the learning. It's the learning. And I've said that to a lot of people, like, if you don't, my first editor that I ever hired, the question gave him the manuscript, and before he even read it, he called me and said, "So I have one question for you." I was like, "Yeah, what's your question?" He said, "So if I read this, start editing it, come back to you and say it's not good enough to be published, are you going to write another novel, or what are you going to do? Just scrap this one. This is no good." I'm like, dude, I will write the rest of my life. I don't know if I'll ever
Mhm.
sell a book, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So he's like, okay, that's the answer I needed. And he ended up and really enjoyed it. And he was able to help me fix it. And I think that was actually able to polishing it before it then went out was why I was able to get a publishing contract. I went in going with a small publisher. Because kind of back to what I was saying before, I saw authors at the time that got over the hurdle and finally got an agent, and then nothing happened. And they do another book for that agent or a different agent, and nothing happened. And not all of them by any stretch. Plenty of them got Jack Stewart. Plenty of people I know got an agent. Took them multiple books, but they got it. But
Mhm.
I knew the book was good enough and I didn't want to spend 4 years querying it, then start a 2 year process of getting it published. And so I said, well, what's my other options? And I had a friend at the time, a writing friend at the time, who said, look at a smaller publisher. It's a way to at least, and like Andrews and Wilson, I knew them I used to go to Thriller Fest
Mhm.
before COVID. So I went
Yeah,
in 17, 18, 19. And Andrews and Wilson early on, Brian especially was like, self-publish. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to self-publish. And he goes, it's not that bad. And he said that's how we started. And he
I
said,
didn't realize that. That's interesting.
yeah, that's how both of them
Yeah.
actually started self-published, and then they kind of connected and found each other, I believe, at Thriller Fest.
Hmm.
And that's how they ended up working together. And then that kind of was the spark that started the career for both of them, really.
Wow.
Um, and that's kind of the lesson that I try to, and tell people. Again, I'm not filled with wisdom. I've just picked up some things along the way, but you don't know what that event is going to be that starts the ball rolling, or once that ball is rolling and it hits something and stops, how do you get it restarted? You have to be open. You have to talk to people. You have to get out of your comfort zone and do podcasts or go to conferences or whatever, because as you know, you've spent, a career in the military. A lot of times it's not always what you know, but it's who you know. So if you know the right person, that can open a door for you that maybe you didn't even know existed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. And if nothing else, then you get to develop some amazing relationships along the
Correct.
way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say her name, but um, there's one lady that I see at Thriller Fest every year that I can't wait to see, and I always end up seeing her at the awards dinner. And
Hmm.
it basically all started out last year because my girlfriend and I were there, and it was I take this seriously. I mean, I look at this as a job,
Hmm.
as another job,
Right.
and so I try to do it well. Everything from social media and all that. So I was dressed well. I was wearing a tux,
Hmm.
and yeah, probably a little overdressed for that event, but maybe not. So I was the only guy there wearing one, so I was fine. I mean, you know, uh, Luke Beneke wears a tux. He looks great.
Hmm.
Uh, but my significant other was wearing this beautiful gown, and she had obsessed over it for about 4 months trying to figure out which one to wear. And we meet this lady, and she's like, "Oh my God, you look so beautiful!" And sweet sweet girl was like, "Oh my gosh, you look amazing too!" And then they just kind of like, and then we ended up talking, and I learned a whole
Yeah.
heck of a lot about Audible and that sort of stuff from the lady.
Right.
Uh, and then we saw him this year, and it was the same sort of replay of that. So it's, oh, you
Yeah.
God, your dress looks great. So it's so much fun. And then we email back and forth occasionally
Mm.
and talk to her. It's just she's been a good mentor.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Again, you put yourself out there, you go to a whatever. And I know and I've talked a lot about the conferences over the years on the podcast, or either when I've been a guest or now hosting my own. And there's a it's difficult because there's some arguments you can make to go to at least one or go to as many as you can because of the doors it could
Mhm.
open. But then you also a lot of times have to look at it from a practical standpoint and say, especially like Thriller Fest. Thriller Fest is kind of the granddaddy of it. It's one of the old. I think it's just started celebrated 20 years this year, if I recall.
Mhm.
But it's also normally pretty much the most expensive one
Yeah.
because you're in New York City,
Yeah.
which is the biggest factor. And you, it costs. It costs to go there. And then you sometimes have to weigh. This year I was going to go. I was thinking Thriller Fest, and it was my first week of custody with my kids, so ruled that one out real quick. And then I was thinking BoucherCon, and it was back in New Orleans. I was like, I kind of got unfinished business because that time I went and met Jack, and the conference had been canceled.
Mhm.
Hurricane came through that weekend, so I flew in on I think Wednesday night. I think it was Wednesday night. Yeah. And I was supposed to stay till Sunday, and I had plans and everything. I had to fly out first thing Saturday morning, and it wasn't the last flight to leave the airport, but it was the last flight American Airlines could get me on to get me out before the hurricane, or I would have literally
Mhm.
been stuck there for a week and a half.
Oh goodness.
That wouldn't have worked. So I kind of thought, well, I have unfinished business there, but my daughter turns 14 the day the conference starts, and I'm like, I'm that's just not an option for me. I'm not going to miss
Yeah.
even
No,
if
it's
I, it's
ridiculous to do that.
what's that?
You wouldn't. You don't need to do that.
No, even if I only see her for an hour that day, it's not even my
Mhm.
custody day, but I'll get to see her. So just spending that time with her,
Yeah.
and I would have as a kid too. I'd probably remember if my dad was like, "Hey, I know it's your birthday, but I'm going to go to a writing conference." My brain would say, "Oh, really? That's more important than seeing your kid." So I was like, "Yeah, no, no, not an option." Not
Yeah.
an option. So that's okay. I'm gonna go have fun 2 weeks after that. I've got an unannounced trip I've planned for a research trip for Downfall, which is my fourth Body Man book that comes out next summer. So I've as often as I can, if I can get boots on the ground places, I try to, and I
Mhm.
normally can't. But so I try to draw off either previous trips I've done or research the site as best I can online or through videos and that kind of stuff, just so I do it justice.
Yeah. That's
Seeing
just that's a good thing. Yeah. It's funny. You know how I solved that problem?
what's that?
I just write about Charleston. You know, I love Charleston. So every time, I
How
mean,
far are you from Charleston? I'm about 3 hours.
a little further than that,
A little further.
but
Okay.
probably about 4 hours,
Okay.
maybe four and a half. But like, I'm going to the Cussler convention there in October.
Okay.
Can't wait. I mean, I think the first thriller I ever read was Raise the Titanic, and I was hooked
Hmm.
after that. So, but Ryan Pope was telling me about the Cussler convention, and he's like, "Hey, dude, y'all check it out." I'm like, I don't know. What is it? I'd heard about it. I wasn't really
Hmm.
sure. He's like, nah, dude, you got to be there. And he started, he talked a little bit more about it. It's like, okay, fine. No problem. It's in Charleston. I get a chance to go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we'll have a good weekend there. But the cool thing is especially this year, and I'm kind of diverging a little bit from my point, but
It's okay.
um, Brad Taylor has a fantastic fundraiser for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation,
Hmm.
which is a, a charity that's very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Having worked in that community, so I get a chance to go to that on a Thursday night, and then go to
Okay.
the customer event on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and be in Charleston, which is awesome. So, but I write about Charleston. I mean, it's pretty much the central location of most of my books, or at least a jumping off point,
Okay.
or maybe for this last one that I'm working with, it's at least they run through South Carolina, so it's all pretty good.
So why is that? Why is Charleston just the place that kind of gets you in the feels, and that's where you
Dude, I'm
love
gonna
spending?
move there as soon as I've got probably about 5 or so more years of
Okay.
working, hard full time,
Yeah.
and then John's Island or one of those little places around there. Here I come.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
I've got a buddy who's a musician, and he has a place on John's Island, and I've been down to his studio a few times and got a boat there. And yeah, it's and nice thing about John's Island is you're not far from Charleston, but literally if you
Hmm.
go out on his pier or out in his yard, you don't feel like you're anywhere near any, you're not near any city, but you're 25 minutes from downtown Charleston if it's if it's that far. So
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it.
yeah.
Folly Beach, Kiowa. I mean, Kiowa's amazing. We usually go there pretty much every year for a medical conference, and
Okay.
really always enjoy when we get the opportunity to go there. But yeah, we love that area. I grew up on Eastern Shore, Maryland. I was actually up
Okay.
at St. Michael's this weekend, and it feels a lot like that, just southern,
Mhm.
and which is a good combination for me. So yeah, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that's cool. No, it's you find a place. I haven't found. I'd say if I found my place, it's probably Yosemite. That's the I go back. I have my
Yeah, you
nine
seem
to
like you
five.
had a great trip there.
Yeah, that was Yellowstone, but yes, I've had a great
Oh yeah,
Yosemite
yeah.
trip.
Sorry.
No, no,
Okay.
no,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. My 9 to 5 job, my boss is based about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours from Yosemite. So I've just been fortunate over the years that either I can come in a few days early or stay a few days late, or
Mm-hmm.
have to work through, have to be there over a weekend, and on the weekend there's not work. So it's like go do what you want. Can I go to Yosemite? He's like, yeah, I'll pay
Yeah.
for it, just as long as you
Nice.
don't go stay at the resort. If you want to camp, I'll
Mhm.
pay for the camping. So it's been a good deal to just be able to see the park. And I've had people over the years be like, "Man, you've been there so many times. Why not go other places around there?" And I'm like, and I think part of it is that's the spot that I finished my first novel. Never got
Mhm.
published, but I finished it in the park. And I sat there and I wrote for like 8 to 10 hours, at least 8 hours that day. And I literally typed the end, smoked a
Mhm.
cigar, cried, screamed. And then I'm like, I got to get my ass out of here and catch a red eye to get home to my family. And so I rushed to San Francisco as fast as I could to
Mhm.
catch my flight. And I think that's probably the heart tug that always pulls me back to like, sure, I could go to other spots in Northern California that are just, really, really nice, but I'd rather stay and go in the Sierra Nevadas and go to Yosemite when once a year or every 2 years or whatever. So, but yes,
Nice.
Yellowstone. So Yellowstone was my son graduated this year and turned 18. He's off to college in the next week and a half, and I was thinking he'd want to go somewhere international, and that's probably because that's where my passion is. So I said, hey, I'll take you anywhere in the world as long as it's reasonable. I can't take you to uh,
Mhm.
Antarctica, or I can't take you up the highest peaks in the world, some crazy trips, but take you somewhere, Paris, Scotland, wherever. He's like, I want to go to Yellowstone. I'm like, that's actually one of the few national parks, larger ones that I haven't been to. It was definitely on my bucket list. So yeah, we had a fabulous trip.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely,
fantastic.
definitely fun. So, and definitely weird for him going off to college. I'll probably make peace with it after he's been there for a year because I won't, not there yet, but it's part of life, and it'll be a great experience for everybody. So.
Yeah, it's a nice transition. I mean, I've got 2 children, and you know, getting the first one out the door was actually a lot harder than the second one. But she did well and had a great college career and finished up, and yeah, it all went well. So that's good.
So let's rewind for a second. I know we've been kind of talking a lot about the process and stuff, but so your background is one of the things that I thought was really fascinating, just with your career and the things you've been able to experience through the military. But what got you? I'm always interested because I never served. Didn't really have it in my family. My uncle served. Was not a positive thing for him. He did not do well. He probably shouldn't have ever signed up. Different time back then. He was in the Vietnam era as well. But we didn't have that kind of family dynamic that a lot of times military families see their
Mhm.
kids then join. So what got you to the spot where you wanted to serve the country?
It's interesting. For one thing, it's kind of the family business.
Okay.
Um, so great grandfather, World War One.
Hmm.
Actually, both great grandfather and grandfather, the black sheep that I was mentioning earlier.
Hmm.
Um, World War One. Every single one of my uncles, World War Two. Um, at least one of my uncles, Vietnam. My One of my other uncles, and I actually just saw him this weekend, was a paratrooper medic, and actually in the same regiment that I was in the 82nd Airborne.
Oh, wow.
Um, Served there. My dad was a Marine. My youngest brother's a Marine. My middle brother's a paratrooper like myself.
Hmm.
Um, my youngest nephew is a Marine. My oldest nephew is on his way to OCS when he graduates from Ole Miss this year.
Hmm.
So it's just kind of what we do. And it's interesting. My dad never pushed any of us to join the military. It's just
Okay.
something that we did.
So, yeah.
And it's interesting. Yeah, I grew up, I was pretty poor when I was growing up. We didn't have a lot of money.
Hmm.
It was an opportunity for me to get away from a little tiny town.
Sure.
So I took it. And for whatever reason, I was kind of like a duck to water. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not a super soldier, but I was a pretty good medic. And just, and just opportunities just flowed to you. I mean, if you would just, do what you're told, do it well, pay attention to detail, do the basics really well. I kind of preach that a lot with a lot of the students that I teach now.
Hmm.
Um, you tend to do pretty well, and I just loved it. I mean, I grew up. Um, Summer times, my mom would be teaching GED classes for the
Okay.
state highway worker people.
Hmm.
So she'd been teaching and she would just drop me off at the elementary school library where she was teaching the classes. And so I would be sitting there in the history section, reading about
Hmm.
George Washington and Robert E. Lee and Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson and, just reading about the founding of our country and reading all these military books and Daniel Boone and David Cross, all these American, founding father hero figures, and just loved it. And that has continued throughout my entire career. I ended up serving 36 years total
Yeah.
in the regular Army, Army Reserve, and National Guard.
Hmm.
Kind of hit all the different things, and so it was just a good opportunity for me. I started out in a light infantry division, got a chance to go to jump school, got a chance to go
Hmm.
to air assault school, and then went through a commissioning process and did really well there and ended up in the 82nd Airborne and love those guys. It was great. And then kind of life throws a change at you, and I ended up getting out and going to graduate school,
Hmm.
and but ended up missing it so badly
Hmm.
that I just felt like I had to get back into it,
Hmm.
and got back into it, and of course, then the war started,
Hmm.
and that next thing I know, I was in Afghanistan, and that sort of thing happens, and came home, and the freaking war continued to drag on forever and a day, and ended
Yeah.
up deploying again later on, but got into some special operations units as a reservist,
Hmm.
and just continued to do well, and continue to read, and so that formed a lot of who I am
Yeah.
over time, and yeah, it's been good. It's interesting. The best thing now is, and this kind of goes back to the whole social media thing, and
Hmm.
as a writer, is you know, I I know these characters because I've met most of them. As a
You've
matter of
met
fact,
them.
most of the
Yeah.
characters I write about are little compilations of friends
Yeah.
of
Snippets
mine.
of real people.
Especially some of the bad guys, or there's one bad guy
Right.
that I'm writing. I can't stand the dude. Um, but so or just little bits and pieces of the character that kind of
Sure.
pops out. But um, so it's just been fantastic. But it's interesting. I ended up getting I retired as a colonel,
Hmm.
And I mean, I had the best retirement ever. It was on Sicily drop zone. People were jumping out of airplanes as I was talking and stuff like that. It was just freaking fantastic. And but now I'm retired and I get a chance to encourage other guys who are veteran writers, who are veterans starting small businesses, and I'm sure you probably saw a lot of that on the social media. If I see so if somebody pops up on my feed and they're like, "Hey, I've got this veteran-owned coffee company," you know, I'm gonna do a quick post about it
Yeah.
and help to encourage them because I think everybody needs a little bit of encouragement like that.
Hmm.
So that's what I try to do, and I like it.
Well, and I think that's one of the beauties of it as well, especially speaking in the writing world, is you see that the authors that served, um, I envy it probably in a way because I didn't serve, and you can see that they have this bond, they have this
Hmm.
brotherhood that connects, and so I've got a flag here behind me there, I've got a flag over here. So my college roommate, who, and I've said this before on the podcast, there was four of us stuffed in that college dorm room, and he came in the door. He did not want to be there. I didn't know at the time. He came in the door, and I thought, this guy's the biggest dick in the world, and I'll never be his friend. How long until I don't have to be a roommate with this person? Well, ironically, I ate those words, and 30, yeah, we're at 30 years I think this month is when we started college. So 30 years later, he's one of my closest friends. So his mom made him go to college, essentially. She's like, you need to get a degree. You need to do this. He didn't want it. So after his junior year, he was like, I'm done. I'm not finishing. I don't want to finish. Got a job with the local town up there in North Carolina, probably
Hmm.
close to where you are. Um, and then he calls me one day, and I knew he would at some point just based on as close as we were. He's like, I'm joining the army. And I'm like, are you
Hmm.
serious? So, I went to, when he graduated basic down in Benning, I went down there. Several years later, when he tried out for SF and graduated over at Bragg, I went over to his graduation, and then he started this career. And he
Hmm.
would get, and he was single the whole time. And he kind of saw early on how difficult it is to be married and be in the military. And I know people do make it
Yeah.
and it's successful, but he was like, I don't want that. So if I'm in this, I'm married to it basically.
Hmm.
So he stayed single. So he would take every deployment he could. As soon as he
Hmm.
could get back out, he would. And he loved being deployed. But he would always bring me black, and I don't have they're in the other room. I don't have them here behind me, but he always brought me back a flag.
Hmm.
Half the time I would think they're BS stories of how he got it. Oh man, I
Yeah.
almost got killed doing this and all this. But like I have a flag that was on the Jordan Iraq border when they crossed in during Operation Iraqi Freedom that was hanging. I've got a UN flag for he air quoted as he told me. He goes, "We liberated a UN facility and I got you a flag." And I was like,
Hmm.
"Cool." He goes, "Yeah, we stole a lot of shit." I was like, "All
Yeah.
right, there we go." Um,
Well,
but yeah, so he was able to get me all these cool things. And then even after the years have passed, every now and then he'd call me and be like, "How are my flags?" I was like, "They're safe. Nothing's happening to your flag. I cherish them." So,
nice.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great bond, and we still. I invited him this year. I had a long-standing golf trip. We had an opening this year. I tried to get him to go a couple years before, and it just didn't work out logistically. So he came this year for the first time, and there's like I think 18 of us this year, 16 of us. So he's probably got the invite for going forward. Him and I are planning a trip over to Australia, New Zealand next year because we're both going to turn 50. So yeah, it's a special. It's been cool to have that bond. But then on the flip side, like you were mentioning, it's interesting to see the dynamics of how that lifestyle changes people. And especially, he came in right before 9/11 happened and basically served an entire career in wartime, which
Yeah.
really has not been the norm for anyone that served in the military for, ever, basically.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it's very much not the norm. I mean, when the war first started, I mean, everybody and their brother thought, oh, it's gonna be a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month operation, and then we're
Right.
done.
Yep.
And 20 years later, I mean, my second daughter was born on 9/10/2001. I mean, our whole entire world just, I mean, it's funny. I remember stopping at a bagel shop to get some bagels to take back to the hospital. And some guy was watching the news on a laptop in the bagel
Hmm.
shop, which, back then was like unheard of. And I'm like, how the hell are you watching the news on this
Right.
thing? And he's like, oh gosh, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And, obviously everybody's world just kind of changed dramatically
Yeah,
after that.
it really did. Um, So you've been out for a little while? Been out for several years or
See, I retired in 2022.
2022? Okay. When did that writing bug kind of kick in while you were were you writing when you were in the military?
Not
Not really.
right. No, it was all kind of like right around the same time. Like I
Okay.
retired, and I'm trying to think. I may have started sketching out some ideas.
Hmm.
Let me think. Hang on. Let me think about that for a second. Hold on.
Put you on the spot.
No, well, I'll tell you when I first decided to do it, I was at a medical conference down in Kiowa,
Okay.
and actually I actually just saw it the other day. I need to pull it out and frame it or something, but I took a placemat that I was sitting at, and I just started like word salading ideas for a first novel, like
Hmm.
like good guys, bad guys, central event, blah blah blah, and just kind of scribbling things down there. And I looked at it the other day, and I was like, oh gosh, the final product looked nothing like this. But but that's kind of how I got the start, and then I just started writing. It was funny because that same trip I started, or that same thing, I had just started my doctorate as well. So
Wow.
the first book coincided with me, going through, another layer of graduate school
Hmm.
and finishing that. It is amazing though, because when I finished that education, I was a much better writer.
Hmm. I believe it.
I mean, my research skills really increased
Right.
significantly. Um, and but then I was done, and I was able to really kind of focus and jump in on writing. So I think I finished that first novel probably 6 months after that event. I think it probably took me almost 18 months to write the first one. And then after that, you hear the old adage, you have all your entire life to write your first book, and you got a year to write your second.
Right.
Basically assuming you've got a publishing gig, but
Yeah.
but so just bang. Next time I think it took me 8 months to write the next one, and I've just kind of continued on that pace ever since.
Yeah, no, it's pretty yeah, it's a challenge. Getting that first one out is pretty rewarding, but knowing that, because I was
Well,
under contract for three when I first started and I was just like, what am I doing? I didn't know at the time when after I wrote the first one where I was going with the second one. I was like, okay, I wrote a cool novel. It's like,
mhm.
where do I go from here? Well, then I had to go from there. Last year and probably the next three, probably a total of 3 years in a row, I'm going to do two books. Now, the only way I'm able to do that, I had someone ask me that on their podcast recently of interviewing me, like, how are you doing two books a year with kids, with full-time job, with travel, with all the hiking you do and all that? And I said, I'm pilfering stuff I wrote years ago before I could get
Yes.
published that were really good stories. They just weren't good enough. But
Yeah.
now, 10 years, 8 years on, I've gotten a lot better as a writer. So I can actually go in and critique myself and be like, well, this chapter's crap. And I can go in and I can reformat it, in a night
Mhm.
versus spending, 2 weeks writing that chapter. I can get it pretty quick. So, and the second novel every year is brand new, like I'm writing from scratch. So I don't think I can keep that going. I don't have enough stuff to do it many years in a row, but I don't think I can keep that pace going unless something changes and I can write full time for a living, which could happen, and I believe it can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. It's not like, well, if I don't get to that point, this isn't a success. When I finished my first novel that didn't get published, that was a success because I tell this to people all the time, a lot of people want to write a novel, but very few, population wise, actually finish one.
Mhm.
So to
Yeah.
get one done, even if it's crap, it needs to be redone and needs edits and all that stuff. You need to reward, even just pat yourself on the back and saying, hey, you just accomplished something that honestly probably few people in the course of human history have ever done
Yeah.
comparatively. So that's something to be kind of commended, basically. And that's what I always tell people. But you got to get to that finish line. You got to get that first draft done because that's the other thing is you can't fix something unless you get it to a spot where it needs to be fixed, and you got to finish writing it. I know some people edit as they go, and but I'm not against that. I've done it sometimes like that, but I think a lot of times that takes the process so much longer that sometimes maybe it's good to just get that first draft done and
Yeah.
then go back and fix all the mistakes that are countless that you made.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a hybrid, so I started as a total pantser.
Mhm.
But as kind of life's changed, as my dynamic changed with my family, with the divorce and the kids and all that, I had to kind of take a hybrid approach. So I definitely do plot some of it now that I never used to do, but it's still I like to give myself the creativity. Like you had mentioned, I had Kyle Mills on, and I've known Kyle's now for probably going on 4 or 5 years, maybe. Um, Kyle writes like, at least with the Flynn books, he'd write like a 40,000 word outline. So he could get up in the morning and he could
Yeah, I've
say,
heard that.
I think it's chapter 23 time. And he could pull up the outline, read what chapter 23 is about, and then he could write that chapter
Mm.
23. Um, I would stop writing if I had to do that probably, because for me, part of the juice is almost boxing myself into a corner of what am I gonna do? And I love sitting down at night and having a fresh new chapter, and I don't know what I'm doing. To me, that's kind of like it's a great feeling, and it could be dangerous, I know, for some people, but I end up what I do is my phone turns in because it gets backed up all the time with the cloud and stuff. I just make constant notes of, hey, you need a chapter that has something like this on it. I was just literally put 2 notes in today for my book that's coming out next summer. So I'll just be like, hey, remember to do this. And what I'll do a couple times a month or a week, depending on my writing schedule, is I'll go back through the notes and go, oh, that's right, I need a chapter coming up soon that does this.
Yeah,
It kind of helps. So that's why I say it's kind of a hybrid of the pantser and a plotter. So it's worked
yeah,
so far. It might one day not work, but um, that's okay. Then I'll pivot and I'll figure another way of doing it.
yeah. That's good. Good deal. Yeah, I'm a bit of a plotter. When I first kind of get the idea for a book, I will literally go through chapter one through chapter 70. I say, okay, for a
Okay.
100,000 word book, I need this many chapters, and typically my chapters are about 1,250 to 2,000 words.
Hmm.
Um, and then I'll do Act One and Act Two and Act Three, and then I kind of go who, what, when, where, why
Yeah.
for each chapter all the way through. And then I found that for the one that I'm working on now, I spend enough time driving. I literally just dictate into my little
Dictate.
iNotes.
Hmm.
This is the chapter about Hemingway's cats, and they're down and going to set up a dead drop in Key West, and
Right.
but he's got to run an SDR first before he does the dead drop for services. That
Yeah.
so I do a bunch of notes like that, and then I just airdrop them into my MacBook and into the outline that I'm working on, and then I just sit down and write and
Hmm.
really enjoy it. So yeah,
Yeah. It's
that way is actually working pretty well for me this time.
I think for most of us that do it, speaking broadly for all of us, I think it's therapy for us, just for life. I think, because especially if you have the gift to be able to come up with a story, to not be able to get it out is almost like a special kind of torture. So to sit down and do it, at least for me, especially, I can speak for myself, of getting to that point where I complete something, or going back and reading something I wrote, and just I mentioned it recently talking to someone. It's like I'll laugh sometimes. It's like,
Mhm.
did I really write that 6 months ago? Or sometimes I'll read stuff I wrote now because I'm kind of pilfering my stuff from 2016 and 2015. I'll be like, oh my goodness, how did I write that? And I'll laugh and I'll be like, I can't possibly keep that in a book. Or okay, I can keep that. That's, my mom could read that and not be like, what did you say? What are you doing? So,
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of go back to the military, and throughout my career, I would look at training events as a story.
mhm,
Okay, we're going to go and um, the down pilot scenario, the
sure.
whole Black Hawk Down sort of thing. Well, with the medical twist to it, and how do you set that up? So then I kind of creatively go through, um, this is step one. This is you go through the whole military, planning process. Receive the mission and all that,
Mhm,
and go through that. And I find that that sort of mindset has really helped me immensely with
mhm,
writing as well, you sort of visualize um well, I mean, if you look at it from like a military planning perspective,
mhm.
look at task and purpose for your mission, and then look at your commander's intent and look at your end state, and that really helps me kind of flesh out my chapters and flesh out sort of my plot lines and all that. So
Well, I think the discipline for, I know so many writers that have a military background, and I think what you guys possess that the average person might not have as strong is the discipline. And if you're
yeah.
going to take this seriously and you're going to try to finish a book or try to get it published or whatever your end goal is, It's an immense amount of discipline that it takes place because when I first started in 2014, it's like, when am I going to write? Because I wasn't going to sacrifice. My kids were really little at the time. I
Hmm.
was married at the time, and I said I'm not going to sacrifice family time for something that it didn't feel like I was like something that was wrong that I was doing because I knew it was right to create books, but I didn't want to cheat my family. So I wrote at night after my wife put the kids to sleep, or I put the kids to sleep. She went to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I sat down and I wrote every night for the first 2014. I did that I wrote a book in 3 months back then. Didn't get published, so it probably tells you how good it was.
Yeah.
But it was something that every night, and what I had to do was I had to cut out television. So I've caught myself this year watching more series, and someone will say, "Hey, you got to catch this series," and I'll put it on my and I'll put it on my list. And I've last couple months been like, "Okay, dude, you get a couple nights a week to maybe watch an episode after you're done writing, but you're gonna have to stop that because you have too many self-imposed deadlines for the next year or two." So
Yeah, yeah, I can totally relate to that. I don't watch a lot of TV. What I feel guilty about is not getting a lot of reading done, or as much reading as I want to
yeah,
because I'm writing during that time. And
right.
I've become a bit of a book dragon. And it's interesting because I read almost exclusively on my phone now because
Hmm.
it's always with me, and I've got probably 500 books on my iBooks thing.
Yep.
And so like that's really convenient. So I'll read through that, but then I want to buy the hardcover, so I can support the writer
Hmm.
as well, and then just have the book. Like, I got all Jack Stewart's books back there, and every time a new Bentley comes out, or Vince Flynn or Brad Thor, I buy the hardcover as well. And um, so I like kind of hoarding them. Man, my to be read pile it's just
It's
just
just,
stacking up all the
yep.
time. And then I can feel bad, like, I talk to somebody and like, oh, hey, did you read my last book? I'm like, no, man, not quite yet. So,
I plead
but
the fifth when people ask me that now because I am, I'll admit, I am years behind on some of the series that I used to read
yeah,
like it was the Bible. I would always,
yeah,
oh, I would have fill in the blank for a big name author you can think of. I would have that book read in the first 2 weeks it came out.
yeah, yeah, me too.
Not the case anymore. I just don't have the time, and also I don't read as much thrillers once I started writing thrillers. I still do read them, but I read a lot of different stuff now.
Yeah.
I just found that I diversify, and I think it was one. I think Andrews and Wilson, Brian might have told me that at one point that they did not read in the genre years ago, at least as much when he was at that spot too, because it's kind of like you write it all the time. You almost want to cleanse your palate, and when you sit down to read, you want to read maybe a romance novel or a sci-fi or
Mhm.
fantasy or something. So
Yeah.
I've almost embraced that kind of thought process as well. So maybe one day when I actually like retire, I'll go back and probably be reading like 10 books from some of my favorite authors that I hadn't read in a decade or two or something. So
Yeah. Good deal.
we'll
Good
see.
deal.
Before we end, I did want to ask you because you had mentioned it earlier on or whatever that Jack Carr. So I met Jack in 2018 at Thriller Fest, went up, introduced myself, was just the coolest guy. Was so nice to talk to. Exchanged phone numbers at the conference and stuff, and we kept in contact for the years
Mhm.
after that. Brad Taylor, the same thing. Brad was super great guy. But you had mentioned you met Jack while you were in the military over in Afghanistan while you were deployed.
Yeah, it's interesting because both those guys I think a lot of. I mean,
Hmm.
um, I think I call Jack the professor because when I look at how he creates his brand, kind of the Jack Carr brand, the Cross Tomahawks,
Hmm.
his podcast and his merchandise. I mean, his writing is just getting better and better. I mean, Cry Havoc, I cannot wait to get my hands on that book. It's going to be a blast. It's just
Hmm.
awesome. So, but and it's interesting. It's funny just because I know. I remember watching an interview between Brad and Jack a long time ago.
Hmm.
I think they're still both relatively early in their careers, and they're like, "Well, why can't I write a book? I'm a Delta Force squadron commander and a Navy SEAL sitting here together, And I'm just like, "Yeah, dude, why can't I write a book? I'm a colonel in the United States freaking Army, dude.
Right.
I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to fail, And just I kind of sort of approached it from the same viewpoint. And those guys have just done fantastically. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think, and I'm pretty sure. it was Jack because I talked to him about it, and I actually had a picture of us together.
Hmm.
Um, we were doing a we were doing a training event, and it was just outside of Bagram, and like I gave him the picture, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm 99% sure that's me.
That's me.
And but
Yeah.
we were there, and this is well, before the whole, him starting his writing career. But
Right.
we were uh, um, we were shooting up a bunch of old Russian tanks. With we were doing close combat attack with the Apaches that we were with, and calling
Gotcha.
in fire missions. And I was on the ground with him and the rest of his guys. And the pilot looked at us, and instead of like looking at the targets, he squeezed off 10 rounds of 30 Mike at our little gathering of Toyota Hiluxes. And yeah, I don't know why. I mean, just the grace of God, nobody died.
Right.
But I mean, nobody. And I told him about that. He's like, yeah. He's like, I kind of. I mean, that guy had such an crazy career with the SEALs,
Yeah.
naval special operations. That he's like, yeah. He's like, I kind of remember that. And he took the picture. And it's funny because I saw his publicist David Brown later on, and David is just a gem of a human. Every time I've had a chance
Yeah.
to talk to him, he's like, oh my gosh, yeah, Jack showed me that picture, and I was like. Yeah, that's cool. So, if it really was him, and I think it was, because it's a picture, he kind of looked like what he looks like
What?
from the
Yeah.
back. He's like, yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah, interesting. I mean, hopefully, praise God that nothing happened. I mean, the world would have been without a very good author and maybe an aspiring author. So,
Absolutely. A
yeah, but
couple.
yeah, I love how I love his approach not only to writing but also to branding
Yeah.
and the whole. I mean, the guy literally has the whole package,
He's
and
the gold standard.
he's just, yeah, he's the gold standard. He's the
Yeah.
professor, and he's just such a nice man.
Hmm.
I mean, everything else aside,
Yeah.
he's just a nice guy,
Absolutely.
and I really greatly admire him, and thank him for all he's done.
Yeah. So when I met him in 18, the Terminalist had only been out a couple months. Hadn't been out very
Mhm.
long. It might have already been announced that Pratt had bought the rights, but he was a brand new author. So he wasn't the Jack Carr that people know now.
Yeah,
He's my interactions with him, and I haven't talked to him on the phone in a while, but my interactions text wise, I'll still text him and stuff. He's not changed. He's just gotten to this level that few people ever get to. But I figured even a couple of years ago, okay, because he's sent me like in previous years, I don't know, 4 years in a row, I got the Pelican case and the book and all
mhm.
that. And even the
No, it's
first
cool.
time I got it, I was like, why is he sending it to me? I mean, and I had met him a couple times at that point. I talked to him on the phone. We talked when my first book came out. So we had definitely had a relationship. But then they kept coming every year. And I'm like, at some point they'll stop coming. Or at some point, if I text him a question, he won't answer. 2025, it's still maybe
No, that's
2026
awesome.
he'll get too busy or something. But I don't think that's not his personality type. And I can't imagine how many messages, and I think he's backed off social media now where he's not, as active as he was
Yeah, probably
necessarily. You can't be when you post something and you get 1,000,
replies.
responses, you can't personally respond. You just don't have there's not enough time in the day. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, absolutely. And I think at this point, the sky's the limit for him. That just that ascent he's not at the top yet. I think he's just going to keep going.
Yeah, I think so too. I
Yeah,
think so too. And the cool thing, I mean, he wrote the Beirut book, so he's you know dove in now to nonfiction, and it's
yeah,
just exactly like one of our other literary heroes, old Mr. Tom Clancy.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, he had the entire nonfiction side of what he did, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
That
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 guy was.
that's on my shelf. The only books that I keep on my shelf with my books are Clancy, and then I have one Vince Flynn book that I keep on that shelf. And the reason I keep that in the shelf is it's actually signed. I have a
Oh,
signed. It's
cool.
the only one I have signed, so I keep that one on the shelf. So
Yeah, I can't reach it from here, but I've got I found it at a McKay's used bookstore, a first editional Naval Institute,
yeah,
um, uh, The Hunt for Red
for the
October.
Hunt for October. Yep,
Yeah,
that's
so
what
and I think I paid like $3 for it.
that's what mine is. Mine's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yep,
it's pretty cool.
it's super cool to have that. Yeah, it's that's always been kind of not that I have to achieve any level of that success to be a success myself, but always the ones that I've kind of looked at of going like, okay, the way they did it is the right way to do it. The way they wrote, way they told stories, especially like someone like Jack, the way they presented themselves. Brad Meltzer's another one that was really instrumental
Hmm.
when I first started going, and he's been super kind. I was at an event years ago that he was at, and he was telling his story of how he got published. And he looked into the crowd, and I swear to goodness, he looked at me and said, "Don't let anyone tell you no." And I elbow bumped the guy next to me who had no clue who I was, and I was like, he was talking to me, and the guy's probably like, "You're crazy. There's 400 people in here. He wasn't talking to you." Well, I wait. I never met him at that point. I'd interacted with him a lot. He'd been super kind to me. He knew who I was. I get in line. I wait like an hour and a half to get his signature, and I'm like 10 people back, and I see him kind of lean at the table and look over at me. He goes, "I see you." I said, "Good to see you, Brad." He goes, "I was talking to you on that stage." I said, "I know you were
Oh,
talking
good.
to me." And it was
Awesome.
one of those moments. So I printed it off that said that, "Don't let anyone tell you no." And I mailed it to him. He signed that sucker. I framed it. I look at it pretty much every day of my life. And if there's a day where I'm like, this is so overwhelming, or why am I not selling enough books, or whatever my whining is at that moment, I look at that and go, okay, work harder. Don't let anyone tell
Yeah.
me no. Keep pushing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
think those
Keep grinding.
influences what guys like Jack and Brad and so many others and Brad Taylor and different people, what they've put out there, they'll never realize how much that has done good for authors that come up behind them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I can certainly, attest to that. I think I've been so influenced by some of these other guys who are out there and being successful and I just they're good role models. I want to be a good role model, and so we'll just kind of keep going,
yeah,
keep going on that. Yeah.
iron
So
sharpeneth iron. Keep
yeah,
keep working
exactly.
at it, keep working with each other, and absolutely. Um, So, Jack, I always end these with the same question if you haven't seen the episode before. I think you'd agree with me. Life is like a book. We have a first page and we have a last page. I think it's a blessing. None of us know how many pages are between that. But as an author, you might not be published, but that doesn't matter. You are an author. You've written a handful of books. You get to write your last page. What does that last page say?
Wow.
And there's no wrong answer here.
Yeah. No, I mean you're going to get the empath side of me. Wow. Yeah, just love your brother, love your neighbor as you would yourself, and live that out. Give grace and mercy everywhere, and yeah, yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that answer. Honestly, no one's ever given me that answer. I've had a lot of different answers in your episode 66, maybe 67. I can't remember now. There's a couple in the pike that haven't come out yet. But again, and it's not meant to be a gotcha. I just always want to get an idea of like, man, if especially someone that creates stuff, it's like how do you want to, and people take it different ways. I think Meg Gardner gave me the response I didn't expect, but it just made me laugh. And she just said, and she didn't miss a beat. Like I asked the question, she spit out the answer a third of a second later, and she said, "To be continued." And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's
That's
perfect.
pretty cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, but
Yeah,
no. Well, it's
yeah. I
great.
don't know. I mean, have a great time while you're doing your life, and give all the grace and mercy you can to everybody else, and
Yeah.
bounce your check at the funeral parlor.
Exactly, 100%. Well, this is it's a journey, and
Yeah,
I think so far so many times we're always like reaching for whatever's next, and we fail to enjoy the
yeah,
steps we take to get to there. And then you get there. It's like a lot of things in life. You attain whatever it is, and not that it doesn't feel good, but there is an emptiness of hollowness. I worked so hard for this, and it feels great. And maybe it does feel like this is the great, just went to Yellowstone. It was amazing. That was already 2.5 weeks ago, and the high of being there wore off pretty quick.
yeah.
Once I saw my first buffalo or bison, I've seen them. I literally have a herd of them, like 20 minutes away from me. So I've seen many of them in my life. But to see them out walking, and all there. The first one was really cool, and then you see hundreds of them, then you see 1,000 of them, and you're like, oh, okay. The law of diminishing return kicks in again. So,
Mhm.
you got to go find the next thing that makes you excited. And for me, it's been once the novels come out, I'm very blessed, I'm very pleased, and my brain automatically goes, okay, let's do that thing again. Let's get that feeling again. Let's write that story again and
Yeah,
get your ass to work, basically, is what
yeah,
is what my brain tells me. So,
good deal.
well, thank
Well,
you,
listen,
Jack.
man,
Thanks for coming on.
absolutely, I appreciate the opportunity.
Once that book gets published, we'll have to come on and promote the heck out of it. But until that time, how can people find out more about you? How can they, if they have a newsletter to sign up, where should they go?
Yeah, so www.jackmctavish.com is my website, and at Jack MacTavish Adventures on Instagram is how I communicate with most people. So come on, join the party. I think I'm at 5,400 followers and change right now, and doing great and building it, and love my followers. And yeah, can't wait to see y'all.
Very cool. Thanks for coming on, Jack. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye.